We are getting new information into the newsroom that Russia has just launched a round of airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. Russian lawmakers overnight voted unanimously to let President Vladimir Putin send forces to Syria. It follows a request from Syrian President Bashar al-Assad for military assistance.
Let's get straight to our CBS Radio News National Security and Affairs correspondent, Cami McCormick. Cami, what is the latest?
Well, we learned this morning from two different U.S. defense officials that the Russians notified the U.S. about an hour prior to these strikes. A Russian official notified the U.S. embassy in Baghdad that these flights would begin and that they would be flying anti-ISIS missions. There have been conflicting reports as to what their targets actually were. The U.S. then was advised to stay out of this airspace in Syria, but the U.S. insists that it is still continuing its anti-ISIS missions, both in Syria and in Iraq.
So Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed his goals in joining the coalition against ISIS in this weekend's 60 Minutes interview. Let's listen to that.
So you would like to join the United States in the fight against ISIS. That's part of why you're there. Others think that while that may be part of your goal, you're trying to save the Assad administration because they've been losing ground and the war has not been going well for them, and you're there to rescue them.
Правильно, так и есть.
Well, you're right. We support the legitimate government of Syria. And it's my deep belief that any actions to the contrary in order to destroy the legitimate government will create a situation which you can witness now in the other countries of the region or in other regions, for instance in Libya, where all the state institutions are disintegrated. We see a similar situation in Iraq. And there's no other solution to the Syrian crisis than strengthening the effective government structures and rendering them help in fighting terrorism, but at the same time urging them to engage in positive dialogue with the rational opposition and conduct reform.
Vladimir Putin is actually addressing these strikes right now, but he's speaking in Russian, so we're not sure what he's saying, but we'll sure find out about that later. But what do you think officials think Putin is up to here?
Well, we heard from the Pentagon yesterday. It's interesting that he mentioned in that soundbite the parallel diplomatic approach, because this morning he said in Moscow or in Russia that they needed to act preemptively against these terrorists, what he called terrorists in Syria. Now, we heard from the Pentagon yesterday that the U.S. believes diplomacy and military power should go hand in hand. So there's a somewhat different approach here. And in announcing this yesterday, the Pentagon was announcing that it was going to start in these military conversations with Russia to deconflict this airspace in Syria and presumably in Iraq as well. But they specifically pointed out that there is a different approach here. We also heard a fairly strong statement this morning from a U.S. defense official saying that while we welcome a constructive role by Russia in this effort against ISIS, today's flights hardly seem indicative of that sort of role.
So given all of that, Cami, how would you characterize the level of concern by U.S. officials about another player getting involved in the conflict?
Well, it certainly complicates things, both in Iraq, where we've heard that the Russians will be sharing intelligence with the Iraqis, as well as the Iranians and the Syrians. That complicates the U.S. mission there. And now in Syria, with the Russians flying airstrikes and flying sorties in Syria, that obviously complicates things for the U.S. air missions there. So there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen here between the two militaries for things to be safe for everyone involved.
All right. CBS Radio News National Security and Affairs correspondent Cami McCormick, thank you.